In this eye-opening video, we delve into the heartbreaking stories of elderly individuals who have faced bullying and discrimination. Ageism is a growing issue in our society, and many seniors find themselves the victims of cruel treatment, often from those they least expect. Through personal anecdotes and heartfelt testimonies, we highlight the emotional toll that bullying takes on the elderly and the urgent need for awareness and change. Join us as we shed light on this important topic, advocate for kindness, and discuss ways to support our older generations. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more impactful stories that matter. Point 1. I was kicked out of the restaurant because of my age and outfit. Days later, I returned for payback in Everly, and at 82, life still excites me. One Thursday, my daughter Nancy surprised me with a visit to my shop. "Let's try that new restaurant downtown," she said, her face lighting up. Feeling excited, I quickly agreed and dressed in my usual floral blouse and khakis. I kept it simple and comfortable, and so did Nancy. She wore her favorite pair of jeans and a t-shirt, though we didn't think much of our clothes because we just wanted to spend the day together. We weren't going out to impress anyone. When we entered the restaurant, I noticed how trendy everything was. We felt a little out of place among the younger, fashionably dressed patrons, but we didn't care that as we were led to our table, I noticed the host give us a quick, judging look. That was the first hint something was off. Once seated, a young waiter approached. His smile faded as he looked us over. "I'm sorry, but this place might not be suitable for you," he said coldly. That I blinked, confused. I didn't know what to say. "You seem too old for our usual clientele, and your attire really isn't appropriate for the ambience we aim for here," he added as if that explained everything. "Are you serious?" I thought. I noticed how Nancy's face flushed with anger. However, before we could protest, the waiter called over 2 security guards. "You'll need to leave," he said. "We don't want to disturb our guests." At that point, I felt so small as I realized I was judged for my age and appearance. This was something I'd never experienced so blatantly before. Nancy and I quietly stood up and left the restaurant, but the story didn't end there. "This is unacceptable," Nancy mumbled as she snapped photos of the security guards outside. Later, at home, she posted the story on Facebook complete with pictures. Within hours, the post had gone viral. I had no idea our post would encourage people to share similar stories of discrimination. That night, the restaurant's reputation took a nosedive. The next day, Mr. Thompson, the owner, called me. "Mrs. Everly, I'm so sorry," he began. "I had no idea this happened while I was away. The waiter who insulted you is my son. I can't apologize enough for his behavior." He went on to explain that his son had been running things in his absence, and he was mortified by what had occurred. "Please allow us to make it right," he said. "I'd like to invite you back for a meal, and my son will personally apologize." At first, I hesitated, but Mr. Thompson's genuine apology made me agree. That a week later, I walked back into the restaurant wearing my best silk dress. Mr. Thompson greeted me warmly at the door. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he said. His son approached a few moments later. "Mrs. Everly, I'm deeply sorry for what I said. It was wrong, and I've learned from this." His apology was sincere, and I could tell he'd been humbled. Mr. Thompson added, "I've made it clear to my son that our business will only survive if we treat every customer with respect." This was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. I appreciated their efforts and sat down to a lovely meal, but it was more than just food. It was about reclaiming my dignity. That night, I posted a message online, telling everyone about the apology and praising Mr. Thompson's efforts. This experience taught me that everyone, no matter their age, deserves respect. And sometimes you need to stand up and use your voice to make that clear. 2. I was mocked by business class passengers, but the pilot surprised me at the end of the flight. This was the first flight I had taken during my 85 years of life, and everything felt overwhelming as I boarded the plane that I had saved up just enough to buy a business class ticket, hoping for a comfortable experience on my journey to New York. But things went downhill as soon as I was shown my seat. "I don't want to sit next to that woman," a man beside my seat protested as he looked at me with disgust. His name was Franklin, and I could tell he was not pleased to see me. The flight attendant tried to calm him. "Sir, this is her seat. She paid for it just like everyone else, so we can't do anything about it," she said gently, but Franklin wasn't having it. "That can't be true. These seats are far too expensive, and there's no way she could afford one. Just look at her clothes," he exclaimed, gesturing to my clothes that I was wearing my best dress, but it wasn't fancy. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as other passengers looked at me. All I wanted to do was disappear. "Miss, it's fine. If you have another seat in economy, I'll take it," I quietly told the kind flight attendant. "I spent all my savings on this seat, but it's better not to inconvenience others." "No, ma'am," the flight attendant shook her head. "You paid for this seat, and you deserve to be here. No one has the right to make you feel otherwise." Then she turned to Franklin. "Sir, if you don't settle down, I'll have security remove you from this plane." I could hear him grumbling under his breath as he reluctantly sat down. Thank God, I thought. Thank God it's over. That I tried to relax after the plane took off, but I was still shaken by the confrontation. My hands were trembling, and I accidentally knocked my purse onto the floor. My heart skipped a beat as the contents spilled everywhere. But to my surprise, Franklin leaned over and started picking them up. His earlier hostility seemed to have faded a little. "This is a beautiful piece," he remarked as he picked up my ruby locket. "It belonged to my mother," I replied, gently taking it back from him. "My father gave it to her before he left for World War II. He promised he'd return, but he never did." "I'm sorry to hear that," he said as his expression softened. "It was the only thing we had of him after he disappeared," I continued. "My mother treasured it her whole life and passed it on to me. I've held on to it through some very tough times." Franklin nodded. "You know, I owe you an apology for earlier," he confessed. "I've been going through a rough patch, but that's no excuse for how I treated you." "I am sorry." I accepted his apology, feeling the tension between us ease. Then I opened up about why I was on the plane. "I'm actually flying to New York because of my son," I said. "You're going to visit him?" Franklin asked. "No, I won't be seeing him. Not directly," I began. "You see, I gave him up for adoption many years ago. I wasn't in a position to take care of him at the time. I found him through one of those DNA tests later, but he didn't want to reconnect," I continued. "Today is his birthday, and this flight is my only chance to be near him. He's the pilot on this flight." Franklin's eyes widened in surprise, and he sat back, absorbing what I'd just said. "I don't even think he knows I'm here," I whispered. This was the closest I'd been to my son in decades, and yet he was completely unaware. The next few hours passed quietly. As we neared our destination, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing at JFK shortly," he announced. But then, to my shock, his voice continued. "Before we land, I want to make a special announcement. My birth mother is on this flight today. It's her first time flying, and I'd like to welcome her aboard. Hey, Mom, please wait for me after we land." That was the point I realized he knew I was there. Tears welled up in my eyes as I covered my mouth with my hand. When the plane landed, the moment I had dreamed of for so long finally arrived. My son, Josh, stepped out of the cockpit and walked straight toward me. The entire cabin erupted in applause as he wrapped his arms around me. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Thank you for everything." And just like that, all the years of distance and heartache melted away. 3. I was kicked out of a luxury store, but a kind cop brought me back later. "Grandma, I don't care about prom," my granddaughter, and said through the phone, trying to sound indifferent that I knew her well, though. She was embarrassed because we didn't have enough money to buy a dress. My daughter, Lisa, and I scraped by on our limited incomes and didn't want to ask for help. But I wasn't about to let her miss out on such an important moment. "Are you sure, sweetie? Prom can change your life. Your grandfather asked me to as out of the blue, and we were married months later," I told her, hoping she'd reconsider. "Grandma, it's fine. I don't even have a date," she replied, and soon hung up. After that call, I decided I wouldn't let her stay at home. I had been saving a little bit of my pension every month for my funeral costs, but this was more important and deserved a beautiful dress for her prom, so I decided to buy one for her. I went to a fancy boutique at the mall the next day. I was admiring one of the dresses when a saleswoman approached me. "Can I help you?" Ma'am?" she asked, looking me up and down with disdain. "I'm looking for a dress for my granddaughter's prom," I said with a smile. "Well, these dresses are quite expensive. Perhaps you'd be better off shopping at Target," she suggested, crossing her arms that I understood what she was trying to imply. She didn't think I belonged there because of how I looked. "I know they're expensive. I'm just going to browse around, okay?" I responded, trying to remain calm. The saleswoman followed me around the store, throwing more insults. "Hey, you can really get it at Target in your price range." "This is simply too much," the saleswoman insisted. "By the way, we have cameras everywhere. You won't be able to stash anything in that ugly old bag of yours." I wasn't expecting that. I felt so hurt and ashamed, so I hurried out of the store. I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying standing outside the store. Suddenly, a kind voice interrupted me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A young police officer named George asked. His face darkened after I explained what had happened. "That's unacceptable. Let's go back in and get you that dress," he said firmly, taking my hand and leading me back to the boutique. The moment we walked in, the saleswoman saw us and changed her attitude instantly. "Oh, officer, how can I help you?" she asked sweetly. "We're here to buy a dress, and we're not leaving without one." George replied that yes, I picked out a beautiful dress for Anne. I heard George complain to the manager. I felt a bit terrible when I saw the saleswoman being scolded. But that day, I realized it's people like George who make this world a better place. I could have never bought a dress for her, and if it wasn't for his kindness.